Anybody who has any understanding of complexity, anybody who has any understanding of the diversity of this country, this policy that is one nation, one X, all of it is not executable. And if it's not executable, it must fail at some time. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how many people you con or you move into a cult-like belief.
Couple of things which you kind of said, uh, that the GST Council described it as a rubber stamp authority, and you also talked about the extreme concentration of powers with the center. Do you think this also comes from the prolonged economic slowdown and consequent deterioration of the center and state finances this during the last 5 years or so? Do you think that that is one reason for such sentiments of poor finances across states?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 3 or 4 different aspects here, at least to my understanding. The first is there is, of course, a deterioration in the union to the states relationship. Like all other relationships, they get frayed and or the cracks in the relationship become more obvious during times of stress. So the combination of a deteriorating economy and then the COVID crisis have just made it very, very obvious and very inarguable to any logical person that the relationship is not where it should be. And the irony of it, as I say many times, is that I don't have to go very far to find quotations to justify my position. I just have to look at the reign of Honorable Prime Minister Modi when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. You will find that every action taken by the Union government in terms of fiscal relationship with the states is directly in contradiction to the statements made when he was the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat. I think the question of the GST Council, however, is somewhat more nuanced than that, in the sense that the GST construct itself is not particularly well thought out, rushed to execution for the sake of the usual showmanship and dramatic effect that we have come to now understand after seeing the 4-hour notice national lockdown and the overnight demonetization. Despite the hundreds of changes, literally hundreds of changes that have happened since the introduction of the bill, we are still playing catch up. And it says something that you're still playing catch up 4 years or 4.5 years later. In my limited understanding, again, I've only been in office and on the council for less than 3 months. Let's say at the GST Council. Now, GSTN might go ahead and implement it the next day, but for it to take effect in law, either the state has to pass an ordinance or it has to amend its own commercial tax rules. So there has been a deterioration of union-state relations. In my opinion, a lot of it is avoidable. The thing that really hurts the country is that the concentration of powers is happening in the hands of people who either don't know how to use it or don't want to use it. They concentrate the power away from other people, and then they do a very, very poor job of using that power. And the fact that the GST system is less than well designed.
One of the things which you also have said earlier too was on this breaking of this relationship of trust between the central government and the states. Are there specific aspects that you refer to, or is it largely about, say, fiscal federalism, or you're talking gently about federalism in an overall context?
I'll give you 2 very concrete examples. The first bad faith is the whole notion of pretending to move the devolution to the states to 42% from 32%. So if you look at any level of analysis by any independent body, has not resulted in any devolution. So they have moved so much of the money into the indivisible cess bucket that we don't get the money. The outcome of that is the amount of money we get from the union in grants and kind of subsidies and schemes is higher than the amount we get as our share of the taxes. If we get it as our share of the taxes, then we get to legislate how we spend that money. That is clearly against any principle of federalism. These were all absurd logic. Why a union should not hold the 14% minimum compensation scheme written into the law. When they said, no, the reason we can't pay the 14% is because there's not enough money. The system is designed such that only the cess collected on GST is the basis for paying compensation. About exactly the same time, the CAG report comes out and says, the first 2 years you collected 40-something thousand crores more in the cess than you needed to pay out to the states. And instead of letting that lie in that account, you took it back into the union government's tax pool without sharing it. So you used the cess logic to collect it, to not share it. You did not use it for the purpose it was supposed to be used, and you didn't share it even then.
DMK as a party was part of the NDA-1 government. What has changed in the NDA or in the BJP or in, say, DMK's own philosophy that has kind of pulled you apart?
I'd say right now, the gap between the DMK's position and the union government rather than the BJP. I don't think it's just the BJP that we have an issue with. In politics, the DMK's position has stayed unchanged. We have always been federalists. We have always been for devolution of powers. We have always been for devolution, not just from the union to the states, but from the states to the... But the BJP's position has changed dramatically. The same Prime Minister and Home Minister, when they were in Gujarat, were the greatest of federalists. They have become the greatest centralizers, at least since the days of Mrs. Gandhi. And they want to control everything from food policy to education policy to taxes to toilet policy. So it's more this government than it is the BJP at some level. At some other level, of course, the notion of secular social justice parties is quite in contrast to parties that are driven by a Hindutva philosophy. But even there, I would say that philosophy has not stayed constant. Most people would feel that the administration of Mr. Vajpayee was quite different than the administration we see in Delhi today.
In Parliament, DMK is a kind of silent partner to the protest inside the house. Do you think that the party can, like Mamata Banerjee has already taken some initiative, and do you think that the DMK can take initiative in bringing all the parties, together, at least on the issues that you have mentioned about?
I am very, very junior. So at some level, I'm not in a position to comment about the party's approach, either in Parliament or broadly at the national level. But I will say 2 or 3 things. That I believe the future of the country is in the regional parties and in the state government. Anybody who has any understanding of complexity, anybody who has any understanding of the diversity of this country. This notion that this policy that is one nation, one X, all of it is not executable. And if it's not executable, it must fail at some time. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how many people you con or you move into a cult-like belief. It is failing every day. You cannot use the Swachh Bharat funds for the purpose you wanted because you can't go and build the toilets yourself. So I think at some level, this notion of a national policy is inherently kind of self-defeating. It's a question of how long and after how much pain. Even the concept of national parties to me is already full of internal contradictions. The BJP is pro-beef in the Northeast and in Goa. You can get killed in some BJP states for the suspicion of carrying cattle, let alone whether you actually eat beef or not. The Congress in Kerala, they are against the communists. In Tamil Nadu, we are all in the same coalition. BJP is probably really strong in, 10, 12 states. The rest of it, they either buy power because they control the union. We can show what good governance looks like. We can show what data-driven and actions related to your philosophy. With limited power, we achieve good outcomes compared to those with unlimited power who are not able to execute anything. No.
You mentioned that you've come, your private sector background. So I just wanted to ask you, how often do you find that coming at odds with politics and sort of being in this, doing things that are politically correct versus things that that are economically correct?
There are probably two levels of differences, right? One level of difference is that, as an investment banker or a global banker, of course, you're a capitalist to the core. And as a politician, as a Dravidian, as a kind of Indian, we are all socialists to some degree or the other. Rightfully so, because we're not So that, I think, was not a difficult transition because it was different contexts and different countries and so forth. But the real frustration comes, I think, you see, we are trying to fight a system that is broken. In a commercial enterprise, once you figured out what the right thing to do was, you did it. There was no resistance after that. Here, you can find out what the right thing to do is and find that it's all kinds of barriers before you can actually do it. And I think that's the biggest difference I found. And that's the real challenge I face on a daily basis.